were witches, the original brewers. We all know that stereotypical image of a witch. Gnarly old spinster, pointy hat, cat in tow, gets from place to place on her broomstick, casting spells and hanging out in a coven with her other witches. But what if I were to tell you that the image we associate with that evil sorceress is in fact a case of mistaken identity, and what we know as a witch was in fact a brewster, a female brewer? Back in the day, women were the main brewers of ale. They made it in their kitchens and they sold it from their house or the local market. Brewing was very much part of the local community, and it was under the supervision of the more mature woman. So what was it that turned these witches, these women brewers, these brewsters into witches? Let's take a look at the evidence. 1. The broomstick. When brewsters sold their beer from their houses, it was in order to let drinkers know when it was ready to drink, they would stick their broomstick in their window and it would tell people that the beer was ready to buy. So not so much a mode of transport, but the original beer for sale sign. Their black pointy hats. We all know that witches have tall pointy hats. It's one of their main features. But originally it had a practical use for the smaller brewer about town. As well as selling beer from their houses, many women brewers would sell ale at their local market. Us women, we're shorter than men, and they didn't want to get swamped in the crowd. So in order for beer fans to be able to see where to buy their drinks, the tall, pointy hat would act as a tall, beery beacon. The infamous black cat at number 3. What's a witch without a familiar? The most common is a black cat. They are thought that the souls between witch and animal were connected and they're inexplicably drawn to each other. Or is it? Shall we look at the facts? If you brew beer, whether that's in your kitchen or in your brewery, you are going to be working with a plethora of grains and malts, and those grains and malts are going to be very attractive to rats and mice. And what better way to keep the vermin at bay is that having a cat around the house. So more pest control than soul control. And now, the big 4, the big cauldron to make magic potions. Bubble, bubble, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. 3 witches that cackle in Shakespeare's Macbeth. Were they casting a spell, making mischief, or were they simply mashing in? It's an important part of the brewing process whereby you mix the malts and the grain with water at just the right temperature to release proteins and sugar that creates wort, the basis of all beer. You see, these days the mash tun is a lovely shiny vessel, but back in the day it would have been a big pot over a fire blackened with soot, very much like a cauldron. And finally, magic and spells. Now the final image we conjure up, no pun intended, when we think of a witch, of these old women cackling and casting spells and putting together ingredients to create love potions ready to use on those poor unsuspecting men. Or was it really just an old lady with green fingers who used her garden herbs to make medicine for her local community? These women were often used as witchcraft, but as spinsters or widows, they were very easy prey for such accusation. But I have another image, and I have another theory. We all know, well, some of us may know, what happens when we drink too much beer, aka witch's brew. We may fall over. We may do things that we might regret, or we may act out of character. So what happens when the menfolk of the village did just that? Did they wake up? Did they apologise for their bad behaviour? Or was it easier to just blame their inappropriate behaviour after drinking too much of the women's brewer's beer and accusing them of being under a spell? I mean, let's face it, it's not the first or last time men have blamed women for inappropriate behaviour. So I'd like you to spare a thought for the put-upon witch. With her warty nose and her evil reputation, remember that perhaps she wasn't up to no good, but she was just brewing a beer for the local people of her village to enjoy on a Saturday night. Thank you very much.